Central Michigan camping horror. I have always loved camping. There is something about being out in a tent away from electronics and everyday life that gives me a sort of reminder that I'm not totally dependent on civilization and phones to survive. I know that not bringing my phone is where I made my biggest mistake, but hey, it's Michigan. We don't have scary predators here that cause me to worry, and I knew these particular woods very well. Never experienced anything bad before, so I figured it was as safe of a place to be. It was my younger brother Todd, my sister Amy, and her husband Don, and me. All of us agreed no phones, just tents, beer, and a relaxing time away from life. Well, I thought it was going to be relaxing. You can choose to believe what you will, but this did happen, and my life is never going to be the same. We all rode together in my sister's van and parked at the site we used to party at as teenagers. Even camped here a few times, but had about 5 more people with us. Ugh, the spider spot. Really? Amy complained. When we first found this spot years before, there was an old stump that was littered with wolf spiders. We burned it to the ground after waking up to big nasty spiders all over us after a night of drinking. So we named it the spider spot. Come on, that stump's gone. Besides, it's only a quarter-mile walk and my feet have been killing me from work. Todd sighed. We all grabbed our shit and started walking the 10 to 15-minute walk, looking forward to the fire and, of course, beer. The worst part of the walk was the damn broken branches that seemed to jump out just to stab your face and break off. After we finally got there, we did the usual, setting tents up and grabbed firewood so the rest of the night would be filled with beer. Laughter, then bed after about 25 creepy nighttime pissing trips. It must have been around 1:30 a.m. when things started getting weird. Hey, did you guys hear that? Don asked, shushing everyone. We sat quietly and after a few seconds heard the unmistakable sound of laughter. Just some other campers, man. Probably doing the same thing we are. I answered with a laugh. Without warning, Todd shouted loudly to the people, "Got any more beer?" We all laughed and shushed him. We were having a blast and didn't think anything of it. Then we heard running. "What the hell, Todd, you pissed them off." Amy started to panic a little. "Don't worry, Amy. They are probably drunk, just wanting to talk." Don comforted her, but you could see the worried look on his face as the footsteps got closer. My heart was beating out of my chest, thinking we were going to get into a drunken brawl. "Got any more beer?" Sounded like a weird recording of Todd, only different. What the fuck? All of the hair on my arms stood on end. It really creeped me out. "Very funny assholes," Todd shouted. Then more running footsteps, only this time away from our campsite. Must be drunk teenagers messing with us. Amy breathed a sigh of relief. We all kind of nodded and agreed it was time for bed. That was kind of a buzzkill and I think creeped us out a little. "Hey, I'm sleeping in your tent, bud," Todd said, kind of with a nervous glance around the darkness. "Pussy," I said with a laugh, but was secretly happy not to have to rough it out alone. Once we all were in our tents, it was very quiet. It was the only time I can remember being kind of scared. I must have dozed off because I woke up to Todd shaking me. "Dude, listen," he whispered quietly. At first there was nothing, then I heard the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. It sounded right outside my tent, like a foot away. "I'm sleeping in your tent tonight, bud." Again it sounded like Todd, only not like him. I was about to shit my pants. Todd looked at me in horror, and I must have had the same look on my face because I was petrified. Then we heard the running again, and whatever it was, it ran off again. "Let's hurry, get the fuck out of here," Don shouted to my surprise. They must have been listening to whatever it was too. We all jumped out of our tents and ran back to the van as quick as possible. I've never felt more relieved to be out of the woods. This was all last weekend and is 100% true. The worst part is Todd called me and said he's been hearing something outside his house at night. He wants me to come over tonight, but I'm honestly afraid too. I spent the night in a forest in Chernobyl with mutated animals. I found a mummified corpse holding a list of rules. The area where we were heading in Eastern Europe was known for its radioactivity. We had received reports of strange animals, things that looked like they were hatched from a mad scientist's laboratory. I didn't know how much of it I believed. because some of the descriptions the survivors gave sounded more like Wendigo and Dogman than any real animal. I figured that, in the heat of the moment and under attack, their minds had likely twisted the true form of the animals, horrifying as they were, into something truly nightmarish. There were 3 of us heading into the dark Eastern European forests. My friend Dimitri, who was originally from the country and knew the language, his girlfriend Anna, and myself. Everything seemed mundane enough as we flew into the country and handed over our passports. There was no sign of the horrors waiting ahead. The first towns we encountered looked idyllic enough as we drove through them in a rental car. Isolated farmhouses with cows and chickens dotted the landscape. Plentiful fields of wheat, potatoes and corn stretched out on all sides of us. The black earth here was fertile, I knew, as we headed deeper into the radiation zone. However, the houses and farms all started to look abandoned and dilapidated. The fields barren and dead. Christ on a cracker, I muttered, more to myself than to my friends. This place looks like it suffered through the apocalypse. It did, Dimitri said grimly. A nuclear apocalypse. I feel like the biblical one is far more optimistic than the true apocalypse will be. In reality, there will be no rapture, no victory of light over darkness. If there is ever a World War III, every major city will be consumed by nuclear fire. It will throw buses and cars thousands of feet into the air, spilling out bodies onto the burning skies. Entire streets will collapse, trapping countless millions under the rubble. That's a cheerful thought, Anna commented, her dark blue eyes staring out the window. I saw the reflection of white eyes skittering through the brush outside. Small animals that disappeared in front of the approaching roar of the engine. How far is it? I asked, feeling carsick and anxious. The winding roads here curved through countless hills. It reminded me of driving through parts of Northern California before, when I had retched out the window. Anna and Dimitri seemed unaffected, though I cursed my stomach, which was always turning traitorous towards me. It's a while, man, Dimitri said. This country is huge, probably another 3 or 4 hour drive, and then we have to start walking. Good thing we left before dawn, Anna said, stifling a yawn. She had a can of some cheap Russian Red Bull knockoff, some fluorescent green crap that smelled like chemicals, but she drank it as if it were the finest French wine. I gazed out at the dark forests that passed us on both sides, wondering what kind of sights lay ahead in this land of the damned. It was the last camping trip my school had, and it ruined my life. I was a big deal in those days, at least as much of a big deal as I could be in high school. I was the star of my school's football team. My girlfriend was the hottest girl in class, and I was driving a Ford Mustang Mach 1, 1969. One of the finest cars in the world, and it was all mine thanks to a scout checking me out at one of our football games. Big talks of a scholarship with my name on it. I didn't understand how much potential I had until my dad turned to me after talking to the scout with this excited glint in his eyes. That week, a black muscle car was parked in our driveway. My dad said it was mine. Times were different in the 70s. I got my license when I was 16. I knew some kids who got theirs when they were 15. Anyway, I was cruising through town all day that day with my father. One of my happiest memories. If anyone in the school didn't know my name by then, they all did when they heard the roar of that Mustang's engine when I arrived. Yeah. I was a bit of a douche in high school, but those who knew me also knew I was one of the nicest guys. My friend, Clint, said it was because I was very slow at times, which a lot of people found cute. I didn't care what they thought, as long as they knew I wasn't some thug. Despite my looks, I enjoyed having friends. Anyway, I tell you all of this because something big was going to happen. The entire class, about 50 17-year-old teenagers, were about to go on a camping trip. Tall trees, mountains, warm fields baking in the sun. Situated near a river was a large camp, with log cabins, a few fire pits, and even an outdoor cafeteria under a thatch roof. Not to mention the activities they had set up, even a classic obstacle course. Of course, it was a big deal. Even if we were almost technically adults, we still had that childish energy in us. We were thinking about swimming in the river, competitive camp games like tug-o-war, sneaking off after lights out with our girlfriends, and of course, impressing anyone somehow during that trip, whether it was winning a foot race, pull-up contest, or scoring in the bushes. We talked about all of this after the school announcement in the boys' locker room. "Nick, are you driving down there in the Mustang?" Clint asked me. "Of course," I said. "Sally and I are going together. So, mind if I hitch a ride with you guys?" Clint asked in a hushed tone, looking around at the other guys. "Forget it. There's no room." "But you have 4 seats," Clint yelled. Everyone laughed. "Yeah, that's where our things go," I told him. "Put it in the trunk." I put my hand on top of his head and shook him around a little. "Then where would I put the beers?" I told him. There were a few cheers when the guys heard this. Speaking of which, I am collecting cash so my big bro can get a beer. Anyone interested in getting on this? Pay up. The more you give, the better the selection. Some paid up there, and some paid later. Some made orders and put a little extra in. You have to understand that our entertainment was very limited compared to today. The movies had it right, alcohol and sex were on our minds. Very little else, truth be told. We were very organized when it came to setting up a party. At least most of the time. "Well, if you're bringing beers, then I guess I can ride the bus for a few hours," Clint said, suddenly very amiable. "Still, next time, pal." Asterisk. I parked outside Clint's house and angrily set the handbrake in place. I watched him practically skip out of the house with a pack on his back. After putting his things in the back seat, Clint opened the passenger door and hopped into the Mustang. "Hit it, lover boy," he said. "Shut the hell up," I snapped. All he could do was laugh as we set off. "Hey, I'm sorry Sally got sick," Clint said, twisting the cap off a soda bottle. He was very careful with it after I glared at him. "Yeah, me too," I muttered. We listened to the radio in silence. I stopped at the gas station before heading to school. I needed to fill up the tank and a jerry can. Always good to have a little extra for long trips. Clint kept slapping his legs to the tune, like some anxious drummer who really needed to jam. He got really energetic when he had sugar. I was glad when we got out to confirm we were present and ready to follow. A few teachers weren't happy with me driving to camp, but when you have no real black marks on your record, your parents' permission, and the football coach heading the field trip, they really couldn't do anything. I was still more than a little frustrated. As we drove, I decided to break the silence by venting what was going through my head. Sally didn't seem sick when I talked with her the day before. I heard through the grapevine that her ex was also staying behind. Sally had a track record for choosing bad guys and cheating. She was one of those follow-your-heart type girls. I was prepared to give the trip a skip on that alone, but with a trunk full of alcohol that others paid for. I just felt obligated to go. My father also said something that bothered me. "Stand by her as long as she stands by you," he began. "And when you have nobody to stand by your values, no matter how much it hurts." I'd have happily taken lies and unfounded guarantees over some be-the-bigger-man wisdom. "Do you think she would cheat on you?" Clint asked as I told him this. "I don't know. I'm not special," I said. "I'm not her first. I'm not Dash." "Ah, don't start with that bull," Clint said, easing back into his seat. He really knew how to make himself comfortable. "If she screws up what she has with you, she's an idiot. You'd be better off without her. But she sure as hell wouldn't be better off without you. I'd still be the idiot who trusted her. PFF. You've always been an idiot, Mr. Football Scholarship," Clint said. I thumped the side of his arm. "No offense. We all have our strengths. Anyway, your dad is right. You don't know if she is going to do anything, so try not to think about it. Whatever. And they might not look it, but those other girls are something else," Clint said. "Her loss is another's gain. What girls? Clint pointed to the school bus in front of us. The back window wasn't the cleanest, but I could see a group of girls at the back waving at us. Clint leaned forward and turned up the music as loud as it could get. The girls hooped and raised their arms, but then suddenly faced forwards before sitting down in their seats. Bet you that was Miss Weaver that shouted at them, Clint said, turning the music down. Crazy bitch should have been left behind. I spent the rest of the trip watching Clint and one girl at the back of the bus mime an entire conversation. Him saying things that made me laugh. If she could have heard him, she would have kicked his ass. Asterisk. We took a narrow, wavy road into camp. It wasn't too bad for the Mustang, but the bus struggled. At least somebody had thought ahead and cut back branches. I could see piles along the road and the flat stumps sticking out the trunks they had left behind. When we reached the spot, I parked the Mustang beside the bus. Clint and I grabbed our bags and joined the roll call. We were divided into different cabins. 2 girl cabins, 3 boy cabins. There certainly wasn't a shortage either, but I guess only some of them were prepared for us. After stowing our things, we were given a rundown of camp activities and the schedule they had set out for us. Looking back, I realize now that the whole camp thing was just to make the school look good, a photo opportunity to show off the parents, and get more enrollments. I wouldn't have cared even if they made it obvious. Looking at that schedule, I just noted the free time they gave us. Morning, midday, and evening, except for the 5th day, which was a stargazing astronomy lesson block. I used the first free slow to talk with the guys before we went to our assigned cabins. The plan was simple. Get the booze in the evening, conceal it in our bags, and then hide it in the cabin. There were only a few teachers and a couple of hired instructors. There weren't any room checks. Nothing. These were lenient adults who wanted to enjoy their time there as much as we did. I wouldn't have been surprised if Coach Sykes brought his own booze. 1 or 2 from every cabin. Clint said, bring empty bags. We can't all go to the Mustang. People will definitely notice. What time? Somebody asked. Late, after midnight. I said, we gotta make sure the teachers are asleep. So midnight is a good time. With the plan set, I was part of the 6 guys that would hike back up the bus and Mustang. I wasn't about to lend someone the keys to my car just so they could open the trunk. Besides, seeing as it was in my car, I would get in trouble anyway if things went to hell. Asterisk. Stop crowding the window. I told the guys in my cabin. We have to keep a lookout. Nick. One said, if you're caught, we ain't getting out a drink the rest of the week. Shut up, I said, sliding the window shut. I will get the damn beer. Tensions were high. The first 2 nights of our stay were screwed. One of the girls, that first night, swore she saw something in the woods and screamed, which set the teachers off thinking there were wild animals. Big deal, right? It's the forest. There's bound to be a few animals. A fact that didn't keep her from screaming her head off. It was a big joke the next day, but she wasn't laughing. The night after that was screwed thanks to a pair of lovebirds who crossed by right in front of one of the teachers' cabins. Big mistake. For that one, Coach Sykes kicked in every door to the guys' cabins and lectured us on late-night walks in the forest. When I regrouped with the others outside the cabin, we walked deep into the forest before rounding out towards the car. We kept the distant lights of the camp in sight, just in case we lost our way. We were also far enough that we could talk on our walk. Got some news, guys, Clint said, grabbing one guy by the back of the neck, one of the lovebirds from the night before. Our buddy here got caught last night, Dash. Tell us something we don't know. One guy interrupted. Shut up. He got caught last night with his girl going for a stroll. What he failed to mention was that he wasn't going someplace with his girl. No, they were, in fact, returning from their little rendezvous, Clint said, followed by his best French laugh. Bullshit. Did he tell you that? No, this little bit of information came from Abigail who, get this, thanked him for a wonderful night, right outside the girls' cabin this morning. You heard? The lovebird said. 3 cheers for Stanley and Abigail tomorrow. Clint continued. patting Stanley's shoulder. For now, pay the stupid bastard back for almost costing us a great booze heist. Clint smacked the back of Stanley's head, followed by the rest of us who had a few soft hits in. With that matter settled, we cracked jokes and continued our climb up the hill. We soon found the familiar path that we took down to camp and stuck to that. It was slow going. You'd be surprised how dark it can get, and we weren't about to use flashlights. Luckily for us, the bus was easy to spot in the dark, so we stumbled over to it and approached the trunk of the Mustang. After unlocking the trunk, we started to pack our bags with the cans of beer. "Why cans?" one guy asked. "Bottles make noise," I told him, although I have a brandy bottle here for Max, who felt like being a little extra. "Which cabin is Max in?" "Mine. Hand it here." Another said, taking it. "Fucking brandy. Fucking brandy." We all repeated. "Max always has to be special." "Huh? Well, he better share." "We're not going to be able to take everything," Clint said. "That's fine," I said. "We missed the first 2 nights, so it works out." I closed the trunk and locked it. We tightened our packs and prepared ourselves for the walk back. It was going to be a lot harder. Liquid tended to slosh about, making balance tough. It would take even longer. Unfortunately, going slow was no longer an option. Near the path we took, we saw a flashlight. It bobbed with the person's movement, and for a moment we just stared at it. Then the light turned to us. Silently, we all turned to the forest and ran, knowing that if we said anything, our voice might be recognized. We had to leap over a short fence the vehicles were parked in front of. I could tell that a few of us had tripped over it. I heard glass break and another utterance of "fucking brandy" before we took the tumble down. Loose leaves, tall grass, and twigs. I could tell we had entered the deeper forest when the grass thinned out and all I heard was the crunch of twigs and leaves. I didn't run for more than 10 seconds before I noticed how quiet it got. I focused on making distance. Running with that weight on my back didn't faze me much. I had been running with weights like that as part of my exercise routine. You need strong legs to play football. I started to veer to my left, knowing I needed to head back to the cabin. I was about to say the same to the others when I realized why it was so quiet. I didn't hear any other footsteps. The others must have separated, which was a smart move. It just seemed that I was the only one that ran so far before deciding to turn back to the cabin. I cursed when I realized that whoever was checking out the parking lot could go back to the cabins and make sure everyone was accounted for. If the others made it there before me, great, but how would they explain me and my pack missing? I kept running. A few minutes later, I saw the distant light of the camp. I slowed down to catch my breath and began creeping back to my cabin. If I moved too fast, someone might notice. Basic sneaking in the dark rules that everyone should know, which is why you never scan the darkness. You linger in spots to notice the small changes. Before I got close, I heard something, a repetitive beating sound, growing louder, a steady series of thumps, and footfalls. Then all I heard was a growl as something collided with my side, knocking the window out of me. I could barely catch my breath before I felt this pressure on my back and a viscous pulling. All I heard was snarling, and that weight was making it difficult to get air back into my lungs. I heard fabric rip as my pack was torn open. I heard claws on the cans, but then something crunched. I felt something wet hit the back of my head, and then I heard the hiss of the beer spraying out of the can. The pressure lifted for a moment, but the snarling remained. It got closer to my ear. I could feel the breath hit the back of my neck. I could hear it sniffing and growling soon after, just as it did before it bit into one of the beer cans. Right? A flashlight beam crossed through the trees, hitting me before going somewhere else. The pressure lifted off my body and I heard something running. I rolled over quickly to see something moving between the trees. It was massive, a dog-like creature that bounded from tree to tree before sprinting off into the darkness. I stayed still in the shadow of the tree. I heard the footsteps of someone, whoever they were. They stopped just before my tree. The flashlight scanned back and forth over the forest before they turned around and walked back to camp. I steadied my breathing again when I thought they were out of earshot. The feeling of panic took a lot longer to settle. When I thought it was safe, I got everything together and made my way to the cabin. I took my time not just to be careful, but because I kept looking back. I reached up and knocked on the window. It slid open. Hands stretched out to take the pack, and then they helped me inside the cabin. In the dark, I got plenty of pats on the back. I was the last one, but no alarms were raised. Mission successful. "What happened to your pack?" someone asked. "Did you catch it on something?" "Looks like he already started. 2 cans are missing," another said. The mood was too good and I was too disoriented to tell them anything. I decided not to say anything, but I was grateful it was dark. I didn't want them to see my face. Asterisk. That night was a mini party, as was the 4th night of our camping trip. Some booze slipped into one of the girls' cabins, but I wasn't complaining. I just tried to relax as best as I could after that. Being the camp hero, I had plenty of beer to help with that, but otherwise, we were all fairly calm and quiet. On the 5th day, Clint shouldered me. "One of the cabins has gone dry," he said. "Max's one. I guess he needed the stronger stuff to keep him from overdoing it." "Too bad," I said. "I'm not going to get more. Screw Max." "Yeah, my thoughts exactly." Clint nodded. "Besides, it's the last night. No chance of slipping past the teachers tonight, especially Coach Sykes." "What do you mean?" "Stargazing tonight," Clint said. "Remember, we're going for a night hike to the clearing to get a good look. Maybe I can smuggle some of my dash." I stopped listening to him. I was busy thinking up excuses. Asterisk. The best excuse I could come up with was food poisoning. Not the blow chunks into the toilet, but the painful, stomach-imploding kind that made it difficult to go on hikes in the dark. Coach Sykes immediately saw it as his best football player needing some rest and recovery, so gave me a few pills and told me to hit the sack. Miss Weaver, however, would stay behind and keep an eye on things. She didn't want to leave one student behind in the camp while everyone went off on the hike. I think she was going to stay behind anyway. She was a little too old for it all as well. I didn't care. I just holed up in my cabin and breathed a sigh of relief. I saw her make the rounds, walking mostly between the cafeteria and the female teacher's cabin. I see her stop at some point to look out towards the river and the mountain behind it, smoking a cigarette. I couldn't really see her figure, but I could see the glow of the cigarette tip now and then. I joined her with my relaxation ritual. A few cans of beer were close by. I thought about the trip back home. Clint would be riding shotgun. I knew that much, but I wondered if the extra fuel from the jerry can would be enough. I tried recalling a gas station along the way. I crushed a beer can into a flat disc and added it to the rest. We would get rid of all of them in one shot. Couldn't leave any easy-to-spot cans lying around. With these mundane thoughts circling my mind, I decided that I was preoccupied, as well as liquored up. Enough. It was time to get some sleep. I went to bed and waited for sleep to take me. I then heard the footsteps of someone walking outside. Looking up to glance through the gap in the curtains, I saw the familiar glow of a cigarette. I was about to lower my head when the shape shifted and a second glow appeared, to fiery sparks in the darkness that weaved from side to side. I didn't quite understand what I was looking at. That's when the figure left the darkness, so painfully slow, creeping, not too different from the way I did when I approached the cabin after grabbing the booze. As the cool light of the night hit the body, the shape confused me more. First, I saw an arm, but it was dark and misshapen. The fingers weren't that long. The legs themselves appeared crouched, yet the figure was tall, as it stepped fully into view. I saw that the misshapen parts of its body were merely clumps of hair that seemed to stand among its already hairy form. The fingers weren't long for its size, but its claws made up for it. The eyes lost their red tinge, becoming black beads that caught the light. But even the darkness seemed to dim that glint. It was a monster, a wolf-like creature standing on its back legs, its body an ugly, demonic mix between man and dog. Yet, its face was that of a hound with white teeth, gnarled, as I could see a few poking out from beneath its black lips. As it approached, it must have seen me, It must have seen me see it. Why else did it walk so slowly? Yet, why did its eyes follow mine? Maybe it knew I saw it and just didn't care. It knew that there wouldn't be any interruptions this time. It knew I was alone. If it could smile cruelly. I felt it did just before it dropped to all fours and ran towards the cabin. I was helpless, despite my size, despite my strength. I couldn't do anything. I saw the glass shatter as if it weren't really there. A window to me, a bothersome cobweb to it. Darkness filled my vision, and in that darkness, its eyes became like fire once again. I saw teeth. I felt claws dig into my skin. I remember grabbing a bed frame. I felt teeth sink into my left leg. It hurt, but I felt true pain when the teeth reached my bone and I could feel the crunch. The grating of bone on bone. I was screaming all the time, but I knew that help wouldn't reach me in that second. The creature tried to pull me out the window. It got my leg hung over the window, started to tug at my leg. I heard nothing but ringing and my heart pounding. I dropped to the floor of the cabin, but I didn't feel it. I stared at the broken window and the wet blood gleaming on the windowsill. I raised my eyes to look at the sky and then I passed out. Asterisk. I woke up in an ambulance. I think. The sun was up. A beam of light gleamed through the windshield and straight into my eyes. With the light in my eyes, everything looked dark, highlighted with gold. "He's awake," a guy behind me said. "Thank God," the driver said. "I will let Aurora know." "Hey, kid, how are you feeling?" the man behind me asked. Before I could answer, he continued speaking. "If you feel a little weird right now, that's just the drugs taking effect. If you want to rest, you can. We will dash." I didn't have much choice. I could feel my eyes roll back and then my head drop. I was out again. Asterisk. The next time I woke up was 2 days later post-surgery. I woke up with family around me. There is a certain kind of sadness that still tears me up inside when people look at me. Yet, it doesn't hurt as much as the expressions my family wore as they sat by my hospital bed. My father especially. My leg had been amputated. At least, partially. A lot of it was already missing, according to my family. The doctor explained the rest to me alone. I will spare you gory details, but tried to save as much as they could in surgery. But it wasn't going to happen. Looking down at my left leg was surreal. I just couldn't believe it. Maybe my mind was just preoccupied with something else. I received flowers from Sally, but she never showed up. Turned out my bad feelings about her were founded. She just felt guilty enough to make an empty gesture. When Clint told me that little bit of news, it was like a drop in the ocean. I told him to forget it when he suggested a little revenge. I just didn't care. And sure, losing my leg was life-changing. I didn't get my football scholarship gone, but the university I was speaking to did give us a sort of half-scholarship thing. It meant I needed better grades, and my parents had to pay more than they would, but still less than the full price. I will never know what I could have become. What I am now is nothing more than a glorified manager at a car dealership. I spend most of my days at a desk, just getting on with life. And it's not bad, but like said, I get those looks. And those who knew me can't help but look a certain way when they see me. Even as I look at my leg now, my thoughts aren't filled with what could have been, even though there is plenty of that at times. All I think about is that creature, that man-dog thing. It changed everything inside my head. It ruined my life, the life I could have, but it also broke something inside me, took something inside of me, because I hear it. I hear it every time I am close to falling asleep. My heart aches with fear. I feel powerless all over again. I know it isn't in my city, let alone outside my window, but I still check, every single night. There's something standing on 2 legs outside our tent, and it's not human. It's been over 6 years since this has happened, but I still wake up in a cold sweat every now and then. I started using Reddit about 2 months ago, and just now discovered this subreddit. I think this would be a good place to share my experience and ask if anybody knows what I encountered. I won't disclose where I went camping because I'm afraid it's still out there. I will say it's in the west region of America with some good forests. Anyway, let's get started. My girlfriend, now wife, and I were going through a tough time. Her father just died, and I had lost my license because of speeding. We needed something to take our minds off of everything, so we decided to go camping. We were both nature people. Deal with it. After about 2 weeks of planning, we found a good time and spot. In that 2-week period, I managed to get my license back, so that was good. For this story, I won't give my girlfriend's real name for privacy reasons, so her name will be Elizabeth. We packed all the essentials we would need of a week out in the woods. Tents, clothing, first aid kit, flashlights, a lighter, food, cooler, knives, a machete, $150 for an emergency, playing cards, a guitar, etc. Also, I brought a CZUSA 85 combat pistol just in case. Thank God I did. We packed all of our things into the car, and we were on our way. I'll spare you the 4-hour drive. We stopped at a Burger King about 9 miles away from our destination to recharge our batteries and to stretch. Elizabeth pulled out her phone and looked at the weather only to see that it was going to rain for the entire week. Great. Now what are we going to do? She asked. I guess we should get to the campsite to set up the tents before it's too late. I suggested. We did just that. When we got to the campsite, it started to rain a bit, so we started to unpack as fast as we could. While we were unpacking, we noticed that this campsite was recently used, and the people who were previously there had no respect for nature. There was garbage everywhere. Every third step you would hit a can of beer or a plastic bag. And I think at one point I saw an unopened box of tampons. The wind started to pick up too, so all the trash began to fly around in random directions. When we finally got the tent set up and things inside, the rain really started to come down. We managed to secure the tent well, but the rain fly almost blew off, while Elizabeth remained inside to set up the cots. I went out with my poncho and a hammer to secure the rainfly, while pounding the stakes into the ground. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. I don't know why, I just felt uneasy. It was as if something was watching me over my shoulder and I didn't know. By now, it was getting pretty dark. If I had to guess, it was about 8:45-ish. I finished securing the rainfly and was about to head inside when I heard a howl a distance away. I thought it might be wolves, but it sounded off, like a cross between a scream from a human and a howl from a coyote. I got goosebumps. I headed inside and zipped the door shut. Elizabeth and I snuggled until we both fell asleep. For the next 2 days, nothing too eventful happened, but the third night is when it appeared. There was no rain that night either. As we were sleeping, I woke up to the same howl I had heard 2 days prior. But the thing that scared me the most is that it was closer. I shook Elizabeth's shoulder to wake her up. She gave me a partial half-asleep stare. Babe, there's something out the dash. I was cut off by the howl again. But now, it was like 200 yards away. That was enough to wake her. She sat up with sweat pouring down her face and shirt. Why is it coming towards you us? Said Elizabeth with fear in her eyes. That's when it dawned on me. We left some food outside after making dinner. It was probably going for our food. We sat in the tent holding each other, shaking with fear in pitch black dark. All of a sudden, we hear the howl again, but it was deafening. It was at our campsite. We heard it walking around looking for the food. Well, it found it. We heard what sounded like muffled screaming and loud thumping as it devoured our rations. Elizabeth was hugging me tight and crying into my shoulder. I was frozen just staring into the direction of the noise. The thing kept making these noises and screaming for like 3 minutes, until Elizabeth sobbed into me making some noise. The thing stopped eating. It knew we were there. I embraced Elizabeth and started to silently cry too. This thing actually started to walk towards us. I thought, if I'm going to die here, I won't go down without a fight. I felt around for 2 things, my flashlight and my gun. I found those 2 things in about 2 seconds. I turned on my flashlight and pointed it into the direction the thing was. What I saw made me scream. I saw the silhouette of a creature the size of a full-grown German shepherd, but way skinnier through my tent wall. But what scared me the most is that IT stood up on IT's hind legs and began to touch the tent. I snapped out of it and took one shot at the thing. Bang! It let out the most haunting, blood-curdling scream. I can't even describe it in words. I kid you not. It turned around and ran away on two legs. We stayed awake for the rest of the night, fearing it might come back. Luckily, it didn't, but we still heard its screams. At the crack of dawn, we grabbed all we could, jumped into my car, and drove out of that area as fast as we could. There was no time to even dismantle the tent. We ended up staying in a hotel for the rest of the trip. That spare cash we brought was worth it. We ended up leaving half of our stuff in the woods, but we didn't care. During the whole car ride out of the area, Elizabeth was crying and hugging my arm. After we returned home, we moved 1 month later. Elizabeth ended up going to therapy for 4 months to recover. We now have a baby boy and are living far away from our old home and the woods. We actually have a fear of camping now, but we live in a city now, so there's no problem. If anybody knows what we saw, please let me know. And may God return the thing we saw back to its home. Hell.